Shy teacher greeted the little girl with sign language, unaware her rich father, a powerful rancher, was falling for her. Cedar Creek, Wyoming, autumn 1881. The wind rolled off the prairie in long, sighing gusts, lifting dust from the road that led to the single-room schoolhouse. The building stood weathered but proud, its old timber covered in fresh whitewash. The bell overhead was silent, waiting. Inside, desks waited in neat rows. Chalk was laid out. A bouquet of dried daisies sat on the teacher's table. Maggie Doyle stood in the doorway, clutching a slate board to her chest. She was small, almost fragile. Her auburn hair was braided tight under a modest bonnet. Her dress, plain brown wool, tugged in the breeze. Her eyes were warm, but her mouth rarely opened. When it did, her voice was a low, airy whisper, as if every word cost her something. It had been that way since the accident years ago, a fall from the orphanage rafters that left her lungs never quite the same. She grew up in silence, not by choice, but because the world taught her that her broken voice was a thing to mock. So she learned to listen, to write. And when words failed her hands spoke. The children began to arrive. Laughter, stomping boots, the creak of satchels. Maggie nodded at each one, scribbling her name on the board. Miss Doyle. Some stared at her quiet stillness, but she just smiled and gestured them inside. Then the door opened again. A tall man stood in the frame, broad-shouldered, hat in hand. A little girl was at his side. His face was carved from stone, shadowed beneath his hat's brim. The girl was the opposite. Petite, wide-eyed, her blonde curls pinned in soft loops. She gripped his hand like it was the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Emily Hayes. Maggie had been told about her. 4 years old. She'd lost her hearing during a fever the winter before. Since then, she'd become a whisper in her own home. Still there, still loved, but unreachable. Her father, Samuel Hayes, had built his wealth on cattle and grit, but no amount of money had bought back his daughter's laughter. Maggie knelt down. She didn't speak. She didn't try to coax the girl with sweet words. Instead, slowly, she raised both hands and signed. "Hello. I'm happy to meet you." Emily's eyes widened. Her mouth opened, then closed. She stepped back, startled. Then something flickered in her face. A light, a tremble. Her tiny hands moved clumsily but surely. "You talk with hands." Maggie smiled. "Yes, always." "Would you like to learn with me?" Emily didn't answer with her hands. She just ran forward and hugged her. Behind them, Samuel stood frozen. He hadn't spoken a word. Now he just watched, his chest heavy, his throat tight. His daughter, who hadn't smiled in 7 months, was clinging to a stranger like she had found home. He turned away before Maggie could rise and meet his eyes. He let the door close softly behind him. The wind was still blowing, but he hardly felt it. The richest man in town had never known helplessness until he saw a shy teacher return the world to his daughter, one quiet hand at a time. The days that followed were different. Each morning Emily Hayes arrived, her lunch pail swinging. She no longer clung to her father's coat. She walked in on her own, head high, eyes bright, scanning the room for Maggie. The young teacher always greeted her the same way, with open palms, a warm smile, and slow, clear signs. "Good morning, Emily, I missed you." And every time, Emily lit up. Her hands fluttered back in clumsy excitement. "I missed you too." It was a silent conversation, but to Emily, it roared like music. At first, the other children watched from a distance, whispering, but Maggie never pushed. She simply taught. She wrote each lesson on the board: tree, river, friend. Then, facing the class, she signed each word with deliberate care. When Emily mimicked the gestures, Maggie smiled and nodded. Then she opened the moment to the rest of the class. "Would anyone else like to try?" she asked, her voice a soft rasp. One morning, Maggie stepped inside to find Caleb, one of the older boys, already at his desk. His fingers moved slowly, stiffly. "Hello, Miss Doyle." The class laughed. Maggie smiled. "Perfect," she whispered. Soon, Sarah signed, then Lily, then Tom. By the end of the week, nearly every child had learned to say good morning, Emily, without making a sound. Emily's face glowed. Outside, just beyond the window, Samuel Hayes lingered on his horse. He told himself he was just checking on Emily, but each day he stayed longer. He saw the way Maggie bent low beside his daughter, their fingers moving together. He saw the gentle way she encouraged, corrected, waited. And he saw something stirring in his child: confidence, joy. He also noticed something else. Maggie Doyle never raised her voice. Her words, when they came, were soft and broken. Most times, her hands spoke louder than any voice could. One quiet afternoon, long after the children had gone, Samuel returned with a package of supplies: paper, pencils, new slates. He meant to leave it by the door. But as he neared the window, he froze. Inside, the classroom was nearly dark, lit only by the flickering oil lamp on the desk. Maggie sat alone. Her sleeves were pushed to her elbows. Her hands moved slowly through the air, practicing. Her lips moved silently, echoing the signs. Her fingers trembled from exhaustion, but she didn't stop. Hope. Family. Listen. Safe. She signed the words over and over, building a new language from the ashes of silence. Samuel stood still, watching. He didn't step inside. He just walked back to his horse, eyes fixed on the golden light glowing in the window. His hands curled into fists at his sides. She was doing all of this for his daughter. And in the hush of an empty classroom, a hardened rancher realized there was more power in this woman's quiet hands than in a dozen men shouting to be heard. It began with whispers, soft, sharp-edged things that slithered through town like cold wind under a door. "They say Samuel Hayes paid her extra. A teacher who signs? It's not normal. She just wants his favor. Must be nice, catering to the richest man's daughter." Maggie heard it first from a shopkeeper, then again from mothers outside the bakery, their laughter too brittle. That night she sat in her small room, hands still. The words echoed louder than any classroom noise. She only came to please the rich. She isn't here for the children. She remembered how the sisters at the orphanage used to look at her. Poor thing, with that broken little voice. What good will she be? She thought she'd outrun that voice. But maybe they were right. Samuel heard the rumors 2 days later in the market. A man he'd known for years said it bluntly. "So, Hayes, bought yourself a teacher, did you?" He stopped cold. The man laughed. "No shame in it, but the others are talking." Samuel's jaw tightened. He didn't respond. He just turned, paid for his salt, and rode home, his silence harder than any retort. That evening, Emily was quiet. She sat drawing a picture of Maggie and herself holding hands. When Maggie passed by, Emily tugged her sleeve and slowly signed, "Don't go." Maggie froze. Her throat burned. That night, under a cold moon, she sat on the porch steps. A sealed envelope lay in her lap, her letter of resignation. She didn't cry. She just stared at the stars, wondering how many times she'd have to start over. Samuel arrived late. He hadn't planned to come, but his horse had carried him toward the schoolhouse. The building was dark, but he spotted a small shape on the porch. It was her. He paused in the shadows. Maggie was unaware. She sat curled forward, arms wrapped around herself. Beside her, Emily was asleep, a blanket around her shoulders. She must have followed Maggie from the house. Then Maggie began to sign, as if speaking to the sleeping child. "You are brave. You are bright. You made me smile again." Even in sleep, Emily's hands stirred, signing back. "You made me feel safe. Please don't go." Maggie looked down, struggling for breath. "I'll miss you," she signed. Emily stirred again, reaching out in her sleep to hug Maggie's arm. Samuel stepped forward then. Gravel crunched under his boots. Both heads turned. He stood in the moonlight, hat in hand. His voice, when it came, was low and rough. "You gave her a world I couldn't buy." Maggie stared at him, startled. "I've tried everything, Miss Doyle. Doctors, tutors. Nothing reached her. Nothing made her light up." He looked at his daughter, now clutching Maggie's arm. "You did that. With your hands. With your silence." Maggie opened her mouth, but the words caught. So she signed slowly. "They don't believe in me." Samuel knelt, not caring for dust or pride. "I do." He didn't ask her to stay. He just looked at her, truly looked, and said the only truth he knew. "My daughter needs you, not because you're kind, but because when she looks at you, she sees someone who listens." The letter of resignation lay forgotten on the step between them. For the first time in days, Maggie let herself believe she might stay. The wind had shifted that evening, dry and restless. Inside the schoolhouse, the old stove crackled louder than usual. Maggie was staying late, straightening chairs, wiping slates. Emily and 2 other children had stayed behind, waiting for their fathers. Then came the first pop. A sharp, metallic sound. Maggie looked up. The stove was rattling. A thin stream of black smoke curled from its base. She moved quickly, grabbing the fire poker, but it was too late. A loud crack split the air as the stovepipe jolted loose from the ceiling. Embers scattered across the wooden floor. Flames caught on a stack of papers, then raced across the kindling dry floorboards. One of the children screamed. The other froze. Emily's wide eyes locked on the spreading fire, unable to hear the crackle, but feeling its growing heat. "Outside!" Maggie rasped, her voice barely a whisper. Smoke thickened fast. Maggie dropped to her knees and signed, "Run!" The signs were firm, clear. She waved the children toward the door. 2 of them bolted, coughing, but Emily hesitated, rooted in place. Flames surged, blocking the doorway. Maggie lunged. She wrapped her arms around Emily, shielding the child with her own body. A spark landed on her shawl, hissing. A burning beam collapsed behind them. Maggie flinched, feeling a searing heat tear through her arm. Still with her free hand, she signed one last word into Emily's trembling hands. "Go!" Emily bolted through the smoke. Outside, townsfolk were gathering. Shouts rose as flames lit up the windows. Samuel arrived on horseback, his eyes widening in horror. He leaped off his horse, yelling, "Where is she? Where's Emily?" "She ran out. Maggie's still inside," someone called. Without a pause, Samuel shoved through the crowd and ran into the inferno. Inside, smoke clawed at his throat. Flames snarled around the desks. He found Maggie near the back, slumped against the blackboard, her face pale, her arm blistered and red. "God, Maggie," he gasped. She didn't stir. He gathered her up, coughing as the smoke tore into his lungs. He staggered through the collapsing entryway just as the roof groaned and caved in behind them. Outside, the crowd gasped. Emily rushed forward but was held back by a neighbor. She watched as Samuel dropped to his knees in the dirt, cradling Maggie like she was made of glass. "Maggie," he whispered, his voice cracked with panic. He pressed a shaking hand to her cheek. "Please don't leave." She didn't move. He leaned in, his brow against hers, his voice breaking. "Don't go! Don't leave me! Don't leave my girl!" The fire roared behind him, but he only saw her face, sooty and still. "Please," he whispered again. "We need you! I need you!" Then a twitch. Her fingers curled weakly, her lashes fluttered. She groaned, the sound barely audible. He laughed, a choked, broken sound of pure relief. "You're here! Thank God you're here!" Emily, still held back, reached forward with her small fingers, signing one word into the air over and over, tears streaming down her cheeks. Safe, safe, safe. Maggie blinked up at Samuel. Her lips moved, but no sound came. With her good hand, she signed one word, promise. He nodded, his voice raw. "Yes, I promise." And there, On the scorched earth, with firelight behind them and the child watching, something unspoken but true passed between them. Not love, not yet, but the first spark of something even stronger. A vow. The bandages wrapped Maggie's hands like prison walls. She sat propped against pillows in the town infirmary, but she couldn't feel the warmth of the sun. Her hands, once so fluent, were stiff and blistered, wrapped in gauze. Dr. Myers had been blunt. The burns will heal, but the nerves in your fingers, they may never be the same. Across the room, Emily sat quietly on a stool. She kept glancing at Maggie's bandaged hands, then back to her face. Her own small fingers twitched. She signed a word, then another. Maggie didn't respond. She couldn't. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She crawled onto the bed and pressed her tiny hands to Maggie's, desperately searching for a response. Maggie turned her face away, her expression crumbling. Emily began to cry. "Shh," Maggie whispered, the word nearly silent. "I'm still here." But Emily couldn't hear her. She only saw the silence, the missing hands, the world without signs. Later that evening, a knock came at the door. Samuel stepped inside. He looked tired, dust clinging to his coat. He walked to the foot of her bed. "Emily hasn't spoken all day," he said. "Not even with her hands." Maggie turned her face to the wall. "She doesn't understand why I'm broken." Samuel walked to her side and knelt. "No," he said, his voice intense. "She understands too well. She just doesn't know how to fix it." He reached into his coat and drew out a small folded note. On it, in careful letters, were 4 hand signs. Below them, a shaky translation. "Don't. Give. Up." "She taught me," Samuel said. "This morning." Maggie blinked. "I never tried to learn before," he confessed. "I thought if I hired the right people it would be enough. But I watched her try to speak with you, and I saw what it meant." He gently took her bandaged fingers into his larger ones. "So I asked her. I said, 'Teach me what she needs to hear,' and this is what she gave me." He fumbled, then raised his own hands. The motions were clumsy, stiff. He looked like a man trying to dance with boots too heavy, but his eyes never left hers. He signed again, slower this time. "Don't. Give. Up." Maggie's lips trembled. Samuel's voice dropped. "I know I don't belong in your world, but I'll learn it. I'll learn every word if I have to. I'll be your hands until yours heal. Just don't go. Don't fade." Silence wrapped the room. Then Maggie broke. Tears slid down her cheeks, her breath hitching. She reached with her good hand and touched his sleeve. "You're not just learning signs," she whispered, her voice raspy. "You're saving my language." Samuel looked down, his jaw clenched, his emotions raw. "I don't care if the whole town watches," he said. "Let them talk. Let them judge. You gave my daughter back her voice. Now, let me give you back yours." In that moment, with gauze-bound hands and broken strength, Maggie felt more seen than ever before. Outside, the wind whispered through the prairie grass, gentle now, as if the earth itself was holding its breath for a healing yet to come. The market square of Cedar Creek bustled. Wagons creaked. Children darted between stalls. But underneath the chatter, whispers brewed. "Have you heard? That rancher, Samuel Hayes. Word is he's marrying the school teacher. The one who can't talk, right? Poor man. Must be lonely. Or maybe she just knows how to play the part. A rich widower. Easy mark." Their muffled, cruel laughter reached Maggie Doyle as she passed. She didn't stop, but her fingers clenched the handle of her basket. She kept walking, heart thudding. At a stall, Emily tugged at her skirt, signing eagerly about the pumpkins. Maggie forced a smile, her own fingers hesitant. She felt the eyes on her, the weight of their stares. Samuel stood at the edge of the square. He saw her before she saw him. He saw the tilt of her shoulders, the stiffness in her movements. And then he heard it. "You know what I think. He's lost his mind. Giving his name to a girl like that? Can't even hold a conversation? She's sweet, sure, another voice added, but sweet don't raise cattle. Bet she's after the land. The words hit him like knives, deep, slow, meant to bleed. He stepped forward. The crowd fell silent. Samuel Hayes, the richest man in 3 counties, was walking toward Maggie Doyle, his face carved in stone. Maggie turned, startled, her basket trembling. Samuel reached her side and didn't stop. He took her hand, gently but firmly, and turned to face the crowd. "She doesn't need me to speak for her," he began, his voice calm but loud enough for all to hear. "But I will." A murmur rippled through the market. "I've heard what you say," he continued. "All of it. And I'll tell you this. She isn't here for land or money. She's here because she gave my daughter a world I couldn't buy. She gave her back light and sound and laughter." He turned slightly, looking down at Maggie. "She's not weak. She's stronger than anyone I've known. And she's not a burden. She's the one person this town should be proud to stand beside." Then he looked back at the crowd, his voice hardening. "I don't need to protect her. I need her. And my daughter needs her more than any of you can understand." Silence. Utter, stunned silence. Maggie stood frozen, her cheeks burning. She had never been defended in public, never seen a man stand tall beside her, not for pity, but for truth. Samuel turned to her again, quieter now. "Let them say what they want. I'll say this louder." Then, with all eyes watching, he lifted her hand to his chest, pressing it gently there. Maggie looked up at him, her eyes wide and shimmering. Somewhere in the crowd, a small pair of hands clapped together, Emily smiling bright, and the town of Cedar Creek said nothing more. The days turned crisp. The scent of pine and chimney smoke lingered in the air. Inside the rebuilt schoolhouse, warmth had begun to grow. Maggie sat behind her desk, her hand still bandaged, but healing. The pain was a dull throb now, a reminder of what she had risked. Each morning, Emily greeted her with a bright smile and careful signs. The other children followed. Maggie's heart swelled each time. Samuel came often. Sometimes he'd help Emily with her studies. Other times he'd just sit at the back, watching. He never interrupted. He watched Emily's eager hands, Maggie's calm patience, and the way they moved in a perfect, silent rhythm. He always left something behind. One morning, Maggie found a small jar on her desk. Inside was a thick balm. Lavender, sage, comfrey. She looked toward the back of the room where Samuel stood, pretending not to watch. She signed a simple thank you. He nodded once. Another afternoon, Emily handed Maggie a folded piece of parchment. It was a crayon drawing. A tall man, a woman with a long braid, and a little girl in between, all holding hands. Above them, Emily had written in large, careful letters, "Family." Maggie pressed the paper to her chest, her throat tight. That night she sat in her room, her diary open. Her hand trembled as she wrote. "Today, Emily called me her family. I wanted to weep, not from pain, but from a joy I am afraid to touch. And Samuel, he looks at me as if I matter. I do not know what to do with that." The ink blurred. Maggie looked up and started. Samuel stood in the open doorway, his coat dusted with frost. He had knocked, but she hadn't heard. He stepped forward, his eyes falling on the diary. "I'm sorry," he said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude." She shook her head, reaching for the book, but he placed a hand gently over the page. Then, slowly, with hands that had held reins and rifles but never felt more unsure, he began to sign. His movements were clumsy, but she understood. "I love you." The world stilled. Maggie stared at him, her breath frozen. He signed again, slower this time. "I love you." Her hands fluttered. She reached up, touched his cheek, and with trembling fingers she signed back. "I love you too." He exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath for months. He reached down, took her hand, still scarred, still wrapped, and kissed each finger. No grand declarations, just touch. Just two people, broken in their own ways, choosing to be whole together. The spring festival in Cedar Creek was in full swing. Banners of ribbon and wildflowers swayed over Main Street. Laughter and music drifted through the town square. The sun had dipped low, casting long golden shadows. The crowd waited for the evening's finale. Samuel Hayes stood at the foot of the raised stage, with Emily on his left and Maggie on his right. The stage was crowned with garlands of blossoms. Maggie's heart pounded. Emily clutched a bouquet of daisies, her eyes shining when they met Maggie's. She extended a small hand and signed, "Stay with me." Samuel looked at Maggie, then to Emily, then back again. A hush fell over the town. Then Samuel lifted both his hands. He began to sign, slowly, deliberately. His fingers were not graceful, but the meaning was unmistakable. M-A-R-R-Y-M-E. His hands trembled on the final sign. Maggie's breath caught. Emily's small hands fluttered, signing with excitement. S-A-Y-Y-E-S. Tears came to Maggie's eyes. She looked at Samuel's earnest face, his heart laid bare. She nodded. Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped. With trembling fingers, she signed back. Yes. A cheer erupted, but Maggie and Samuel heard none of it. The world narrowed to that single moment. Their hands, their hearts, their silent vow. Samuel stepped forward and gathered Maggie against him. She melted into his embrace, her bandaged hands trembling upon his chest. Emily ran up and hopped into his arms, wrapping her own arms around both of them. They stood there as petals drifted down like gentle snow, a small family, formed at last. The festival music resumed. Children clapped, neighbors cheered. Maggie lifted her head and saw the faces in the crowd, smiling, approving. Samuel dipped his head and placed a light kiss on Maggie's forehead. She signed, "Thank you." They stepped down from the stage, arms entwined, Emily skipping between them. Under the old cottonwood tree, they paused. Samuel turned to the crowd, raised his free hand, and signed in the clear evening light. "This is my promise. In every quiet moment, in every silent day, I choose her, and I choose us." Maggie's eyes filled with tears. She signed in reply, "And I choose you and us." The crowd broke into applause. The spring night leaned close, and beneath the drifting blossoms, three hands remained clasped, small and large, gentle and strong. It was not spoken voices that united them, but hands that carried hope, not wealth that bound them, but hearts that chose each other in silence, a family found in stillness. If the love story of Maggie, Samuel, and little Emily touched your heart, don't forget to hit that like button to let us know you're here. And if you want more deeply emotional and soul-stirring tales from the Old West, subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story.